Welcome to Invest in Square Feet. Today we've got a special treat, someone who's been around the block when it comes to sales, and he's here to drop some serious knowledge. We're talking about the art of closing, the stuff they don't teach you in school, from building trust to knowing exactly when to ask for the sale. We're diving into how to turn a maybe into a yes. If you've ever struggled with closing deals, stick around. This episode will show you how to get it done.
But he was a guy who could sell you a blender at a state fair on a day you never thought about blenders. And I wanted to know how they did it. And when he said to me, "Are you in or you out?" Not, "Do you want to think about it? Get back to me." This is just, he wanted a decision right there, whether I was going to take this job for this company that I knew nothing about, selling this product that I knew nothing about, for this guy that I knew nothing about.
He's gone.
I said, "Are you doing the training?" He said, "Yes." And I said, "I'm in." And that really started a journey for me into the world of not just sales, but closing. And this one, they had a little trick to engage the customer's greed right after you ask for the deal. And I learned the trick and I was fascinated by it. I really just wanted to know how they did it. But I figured like I owed it to them to go on a couple of leads because they paid to train me. They revealed their secrets. I really liked the guy. And I quickly became one of their top sellers. I also sensed as I moved forward with this company that they were not a great company. It's funny how the best closing trainers, generally speaking, are companies that are really bad companies to work with, because if the customer took time to make an analytic decision, they wouldn't have any customers. So they became great closers. And then once I figured that out, I took my skills to a different company that was a little bit better. And then at that company, but they still had a slightly different trick to, again, to create urgency and engage the customer's greed, which is a really classic way to close someone. And then I went from there to a startup, and that startup had really good intentions. And they made me vice president of sales and marketing. And it was my job to go out and hire and train a sales team in 2 different cities, which I did. And there's some things you just know how to do. And I know how to turn salespeople into closers. That's just my particular skill. And that's what I did for this company. And it expanded and grew. And then I went from there, but it imploded basically. And all this is in my book. It's the first, The Joy of Closing. There you go. But it is, the first 40 pages are just a kind of work memoir about how I came into the knowledge that I came into. But just to continue my summary, so I went from there to a really legitimate company, and I knew that this was the opportunity I was looking for all along. And so I had to distill my sprawling, don't leave until they say yes pitch, which I was trained in, into a concise pitch that got to price within the allotted time that these appointments were set for. And had to figure out a way to close customers with something other than tricking them with perceived intimacy, perceived urgency. And so I thought about, when I first went to the startup, I had the things in place to use this like urgency trick with a third party close and things like that, but I really didn't use them. And I thought about, the customers just said yes. Maybe not the first time I asked them, but usually within a couple of working with their intimacy and they're creating intimacy, building trust, and helping them get something they want, which is really what closing is. And I realized that I had belief, that I really knew that the company I worked for had great intentions. I knew we were using first-rate equipment and that the customer was making a good decision by being in business with us. I believed that with all my expertise at the time. And that's what fueled those customers, that their inspiration to say yes. And so I did all that. I distilled my pitch and I had belief, and I found great success with the company that went on to become one of the main employment improvement companies in California. And then I became fascinated because I was still using the techniques that I'd learned as a closer to take that customer's chaos and turn it into clarity and make a really great presentation that engaged the customer's emotions and made them work for us. And I thought this could work for other, and I tried it on this friend of mine does skincare, and she was having trouble with her staff because she was booking multiple appointments and had no life. And her staff, meanwhile, who did everything the same as she did, were not getting appointments. And so I worked with the team, turned their entire team around. And then I started consulting with individuals, coaching individuals in closing, and then some other companies. And I realized that what I had was new and valuable and applicable to many industries, even some B2C, but mostly even some B2B, where, the customer literally can't say yes.
Yeah.
Or what they can really do is say no. But I still found that you really only have one chance to make a first impression. And so anyway, not everyone could afford me, and I only have so many hours to give. So I put everything in a book, and that book's called The Joy of Closing, The Definitive Guide to Building Trust, Getting the Deal, and Creating Happy Customers. And that's how I got here.
Interesting. Interesting. So I pulled out a bunch of nuggets out of what you're just talking about there. And feel like I was going to say, I feel like sales is always a thing that people struggle with, but it really is the closing, right? You can have a great personality, you can have a great rapport. If you don't understand how to close, and I'm hoping we'll be able to describe some of that and how to do that more effectively. It's not necessarily, would you say that closing, and you can maybe classify or generalize that as sales, would you say that it's very much so a process or a system, much less than just talking to people, if that makes sense, right? Building that rapport, getting to know the person.
I think it's, some people are sort of more naturally attuned to it, but the process of earning someone's trust and getting them what they want is so powerful that once you train someone how to work with the customer's resistance, how to create intimacy with that customer, how to close them, they become really almost addicted to it, because it takes just as much effort it takes more commitment, right? It takes more commitment to be a closer than it does a salesperson. Not really any less work. It's still work. Going out there, making the customer want what you have and then not closing them is actually, in my experience, a harder road than closing them. And also, you're leaving them vulnerable. If you're a great presenter, and the reason I wrote my book also is there's so much great new literature and different techniques of how to present. That is one part of sales that has really advanced. I would still argue that I call it one call magic. So it's 7 steps in a forecast, and we can get into that if you want. But and closing is step 6 of those 7 steps. And it's the biggest chapter in the book. And I think I do break some new ground there, which we can get into in a bit. But I think also just recognizing that if all you're doing is making the customer want what you have and then giving them a price, if you don't close them, you are leaving them vulnerable to anyone with a lower price that the customer perceives as being the same, not that that's how they perceive it, or just someone who's willing to work with their resistance and close them on what is oftentimes an inferior product from a lesser company for maybe a slightly lower price, but definitely a lesser value than what you could have closed them on if you just took time to work with their resistance.
You brought up the word there, perception, and how not closing someone can leave them open to what they believe to be potentially a similar product, but it could be much more subpar than what you were trying to offer them. How do you go about establishing that type of a mindset, or establish that type of a connection with whatever it is that you're trying to sell, like that type of perception where might be able to, or they might feel like there's I guess maybe that's my question, is how do you go about closing them once you establish that perception that yours is the best offer or the best product, and not allowing them to feel like, I wonder if I can get a better price from somebody else, right? Like, how do you establish that where you eliminate your competition, if that makes sense?
You have to become their trusted expert. And that's not just like being smarter than them. That's actually spending time paying attention to them so that they have the perception that you understand their needs. Then educating them about your company, about your product, about how it's going to work for them, and making them feel the pain of not having your product just by continuing with the status quo, because any salesperson is a change agent. You're in the business of change. You're helping that customer make a change that requires commitment on their part, usually financial, but not just financial. It's also they're saying, no, this is the path we're going to go down. I trust this person, this company, this product to accomplish a certain set of goals that I've identified or my company has identified as valuable and necessary first steps. Getting a customer to do that, you can't just sit behind your cash register and ask, can I help you? And
Yeah.
pass a price. You have to actually get involved with them, pay attention to their needs, educate them about how they might change, use your expertise to benefit them by recommending a scope of work that really is probably not what they thought they needed when you got there. And then, or slightly different, at least I'm a naturally rebellious person. It's just, but it's also just true that they aren't experts at what you do. Don't pretend like your customer knows everything about what you're selling them more than you do. Like, you have to actually have something of value to offer the customer, or why shouldn't they just shop for the lowest price? And based on what their needs are and what's important to them, show them how your company fits into that, how your product fits into that. So that, and use some price conditioning, which there's different techniques for doing that, and creating urgency, right? Which is something that often gets overlooked. And so that when you pass price the first time, their limbic brain reaction when you say, are we doing this, is, of course, who wouldn't? Now, their liver brain is going to say, no, don't say that. This is a negotiation and it'll be cheaper. And what is that FOMO, fear of missing out? What if I could get it cheaper somewhere else? Will stop them from saying that 99% of the, 80% of the, not 90% of the time, let's just say, for the first time you ask. But if you're not producing that feeling on the part of your customer that you're presenting to, and this could be fundraising, this could be anyone who raises money, has to be a closer. No one writes a check without adopting your idea, your agenda as their idea. They write that check, they have adopted your agenda as their idea. That's what closing is. Getting another human being to adopt your agenda as their, and think it was their idea. And by the way, that's a skill that everyone has. You cannot get through life. A lot of times it's through threats. I put money in a parking meter, right? And I think it's my idea to put money in the parking meter, but it's because I got a ticket, right? And once you get a few tickets, suddenly putting money in that meter is my idea. That's one way of, when you're talking about raising kids or things like that, you can make it the threat of that stuff. But there are so many better, more effective ways to do it. And that I happen to have discovered in my sales career that other people might discover in other ways. But when you work for a company where if you don't close the customer that day, some manager comes behind you, makes an even bigger price drop and steals your deal thing, you're out gas, money, and time. That really creates the urgency on the part of the salesperson to learn how to close. And that's where I came from. But I think it is a benefit, not just for shitty companies selling inferior products for a higher price. I think the benefit of that is applicable to many more industries, many more types of sales. And the mentality that you have to have, which is basically belief that moving forward with you and your company is the absolute best thing. If you're not starting with that, you are multiplying everything in your sales pitch by 0.
Mm. Yeah, interesting. Curious on your perspective of timing, and I feel like this could be an unfair question, but so my perception is that the more expensive the product, the more time you're going to have to take and establish rapport and all of that. So this might not be a sale that's made the same day. This could be one meeting. This could be 10. This could be 20 different meetings to be able to get to the end result, depending on how large of a purchase that is. But how do you determine what your cadence should be, depending on where you're or what it is that you're selling, right? Like you mentioned before that one of the things you have to determine is like, what is the right time to be able to offer the price, right? That's obviously,
Really comes down to one simple question. Can the person you're meeting with say yes? If the person with can say yes, money is irrelevant. It really doesn't matter. And I say that because like my first sales job was selling tea for hundreds of dollars. And my second sales job was selling solar power for tens of thousands of dollars. And I will tell you, I was way better at selling solar power for tens of thousands of dollars than I was at selling tea for hundreds of dollars. And it's not so money is not the issue, but it's your own belief and what skill set you're bringing to the equation. Is your sales presentation capable of doing two things? Having the customer emotionally want what you have and giving them enough information and enough confidence so that they feel like they're making an informed decision to get something they want. And those are not functions of price. They're really functions of whether or not you're sitting across from a decision maker or someone who can say no, which is a lot of B2B sales. They can only say no. But I would argue if you are sitting across from someone who can say yes, literally not, then those people will say yes some percentage of the time, and usually a lot more than what you think.
Yeah, interesting. There's a book by a guy named Eugene Schwartz, Breakthrough Advertising. I don't know if you've ever read it or not, but he talks about the buyer sophistication, right? Are they very much so aware of what their options are? They've done the research already. They know that they want this and this. Is there a way to be able to determine, like you said, can the person say yes? I right away went to, are they ready, willing, and able to make that purchase? That's what I wrote down here as are they at that point? So
yeah, but able is literal. If they say yes, does a check get written? If you're meeting with someone's assistant, the answer is no. And really the solution out is not to meet with their assistant most of the time. But if you're in a B2B situation where it's a decision going to be made by a committee, and typically meeting with someone who could only say no, right? They can either say yes and move you to the next level. They can say no. And every customer is going to present objections as conditions, right? Meaning an objection is just a reason they can't decide today. And every customer presents their objections as a condition, but they almost never are. At least in B2C, they never are, basically. That person, you're usually meeting with the person who can say yes. They're really going to say yes or no. And they're just going to lie and say, I need to think about it most of the time, which is sometimes a no that sounds like a yes, or you're just buying their story that it's too big a decision or they can't make a decision today, when what they really want you to do is find out what's really going on, what's really holding them back, and answer the question that they're not asking. So that takes time, and it takes a willingness on your part to pay attention to that and go at the level that you respond at the level that they're giving you. But if they say, this sounds great, but I need to run it by the boss. And suddenly the wife who, when you sat down with them, no, this is 100% my decision, is now the linchpin in the ability to move forward. And you can call their attention to the fact that they're lying to you, which probably will not make you any friends. Or you could say, what do you think she'll say?
Yeah.
And let them talk. And oftentimes that thing that's really holding them back, like she's going to say it's too expensive, gives you a chance to restate your value proposition. That's just one example. But the point is that you create intimacy by allowing them to tell you the truth of what they're thinking. And you respond to it in a way that lets you know that their concerns are your concerns, and speak to it in a way that is meaningful to them, and ask for the deal again, and then stop talking. And lo and behold, some other thing will come up that had nothing to do with the wife or whatever other stuff you talked about. But if you do that enough times, they will eventually tell you the one thing that's holding them back. Once you know that, most of the time you can get a yes.
How do you determine when you've actually gotten to that core, right? Like, I would imagine that you probably don't want to keep pressing the person again. What do you think she's going to say? And keep going down that path where you're digging. How do you know when that you've dug enough to be able to say, okay, yes, this is the core problem, and we should stop at this point? Or is there any type of telltale signs or ways that people determine that?
There is one word that indicates you have spoken to their true concerns and are in a position to get them what they want. And that word is yes, or let's do this, or sure, or yeah. And it's funny, if you think about your own life, what is more satisfying than finding what you want and knowing it? Especially to solve a problem that is causing the pain. Nobody goes shopping unless they're at odds with the status quo, right? But so few salespeople know how to bring that customer's awareness to the pain of their status quo and how it's only going to get worse. Before they ever talk about their company, before they talk about their product, you have to make that customer feel the pain of their current situation. And that's something I learned as a closer that no one ever teaches you as a salesperson.
Yeah, interesting. So you mentioned early on that there's one thing that you learned at I believe it was at the solar company, that turned this whole realization on for you. Can you get into what that was and maybe even talk a little bit about how that morphed over the years?
I was in the film business. I made 2 features. I sold 2 scripts to studios. I had many opportunities, and I was only hired 5 times in 19 years. I was selling for this company, and I had this guy that I trusted. He was training me how to be a closer. And when I walked out of an appointment, I would call him up and tell him what happened. And because I trusted him, I would just blurt out the moment that I blew the deal. And I was probably in that house for an hour and a half. But there was always one moment when everything went awry and I didn't know what it was. And I would say it to him and he'd say, "Oh, you made it about you." And which was not the first time I ever heard that. And what I realized right off the bat was that all the things that I was learning to be an effective closer, to build trust with my customer, were exactly how I blew any opportunity to get hired in show business. Because instead of finding common ground with a producer I was meeting with, I would pick fights over the script they'd given me to read, or argue about some movie that had come out that maybe they even had a part in that I was going to find fault with. Like, I was just an idiot. And I think most people are, maybe not as bad as me. But anyway, so that was like what kept me going forward, is realizing that everything I was learning to build trust with customers, earn their business, and make them want to work with me, exactly what had gone wrong in my life up to that point. And so that's why I really fell in love with closing, because it was making my whole life better. And it answered the question, like, that was the hardest thing about my life, which was, why hadn't I found success as a filmmaker, even though I think I was talented and I had some success, but I wasn't able to build on it because I didn't make anyone want to work with me.
Interesting.
Hired 5 times in 19 years to being hired 4 to 5 times a week by total strangers, often on the first day I met them.
And when you, again, what shifted in your personality or your presentation that allowed you to go from being hired a couple of times to being hired 5 times a week? What was the big shift, would you say, with that?
I became gracious. I became humble. I knew that I was being invited to someone's home, and I treated them like I was a guest and not the center of attention. I became trustworthy, so my word became my bonds. And that was obviously a lot easier working for a credible company than who I was trained to work for. And once I knew how bad they were, I really couldn't keep going. I'm just not, if you work for a charming company and you want to learn tricks to trick customers and sell them spitting stuff for too much money, I'm probably not the best person who's to read. Read one of the other books on closing out there and stare at the Porsche you want to buy and use it to marshal your self-will to run ramshot over the customer. But if you believe in what you're doing and you work for a good company with good intentions and a product that actually accomplishes what you tell customers you're going to do for them, then you need to get your ego out of the way and figure out how to do this in a way that maximizes the benefit for your customer, for your company, and for you. Because the only thing more satisfying than finding what you want and knowing it is being able to do that for another human being. And I did not set out to become a trustworthy person when I started working for Scoundrels and figure out how to close people on solar power. But over the course of time, that's exactly what happened. And I am really grateful for it. And it does require commitment. You have to step out of yourself, but you really can't inspire change in another person without being committed, without being the idea that this is a good and beneficial thing. And it's amazing to me how few, even really experienced salespeople, closing is like this part of sales that most salespeople find somehow beneath them or even icky. And the truth is, it's the most exciting part.
Yeah. Interesting. So when you're going through and establishing the rapport with someone and connecting with people and all of that, do you have...
Oh my God, Matt, your sound just cut out. I can't hear anything you're saying. Oh, now I can hear you. Okay. It just very far.
You're good now? Okay, cool. So guys, obviously edit that part out. So we can just cut it up right there and I'll pick it up with this question. So when you're going through and establishing rapport with people and connecting with people, Do you have a sense of when things are going awry, when things are going wrong, and when that happens, what to do in those types of situations? Because I'm sure that, again, all types of personalities get involved here, and sometimes it's going well, and other times it shoots off in this other direction. And is there a way to be able to determine, okay, I'm going down the wrong path, I should maybe inject something like this?
Absolutely. So first of all, you have to know your sales pitch. And if you don't think you have a sales pitch, you just have a bad pitch. But what you say about your company, what you say about your product, how you make your customer feel the pain of their current situation and the pleasure of your solution, those things do not change from customer to customer for the most part in sales. And these are things you're doing multiple times per day if you're a successful salesperson. And the parts of the pitch that change are the warm up, because every customer is different. And when you're paying attention to them, you're going to be gravitated towards different things, even though you're looking for what the scope of work is going to be and what their needs are. But who they are is always different and exciting. And the clothing, what happens after you present price, is different every time. And if you're looking for variety in your sales call, that's where you want to look at it, not figuring out how to present to a specific kind of customer. That's nuts. That makes no sense to me. That's like going in your car and trying to figure out which pedal to push to make it stop or go. So if you know what you're going to say about these things, and you know the structure of your pitch, and you know the emotional journey that you're taking the customer on, even if it's like a 10-minute phone call for an inbound call for your marketing luxury rentals and you're looking for homeowners to sign up their homes, if you don't know what's going to happen in 8 of those 10 minutes, you're bad at your job. But if you do, then you can pay attention to that customer, and when they're nodding their head because they love what you're saying, and when they're shaking their head or looking around or checking their watch because an email just came in, and when they're not paying attention. And there are things you can do if that happens. Maybe if you're me, you find something to shake them up if possible that they don't expect. The other thing is, a sales pitch has to be fascinating. And what you have to say has to be different than the last 5 people they saw. If they're doing that kind of search for a product and just expecting to win on price, that is a type of company. Again, what I'm telling you probably won't work. But what works for me is different and better. I like different and better. I like products where you're selling on value and not price. If your value is price, then they at least need to perceive that what you're offering is the same. And that means you have to establish credibility of your company. You have to show how the product works just as good as what's cheaper and make those points. Like whatever it is you're pitching, you have to have that down pat so that you can pay attention to what's important to that particular customer.
Yeah. Interesting. I'm trying to put myself into a specific situation to be able to pull out some of the problems that I've run into before in the past. But from what it sounds like, you have a very, like, the structure of the sale or the structure of the presentation is very much so thought out, planned out, rehearsed. You're not going in there without having a certain cadence that you're going to follow. Would that be fair enough to say for most salespeople that, like,
Even your job, absolutely.
and I feel like that's something that a lot of people might not necessarily understand about sales. Like they feel like it's all about me, and I think I described that wrong, but it's the way that I'm presenting things, but you might not necessarily have that path that you're taking them down. So that way you're getting better and you can understand. So basically it's not a brand new presentation or not a brand new sale or story every single time. It's, again, very much so.
Throw something in because whatever that was a riff for that customer, and then you like it. So you add it, you try with a few more customers, and if you have success, it stays. And then if it throws them off, probably get rid of it. But you don't spend time figuring out stupid things like where your turn signal is while you drive. You might map out a route that's more interesting because you want to, I don't know, go by some old church that you want to look at or something like that. I'm being that metaphor. But no, what you say about your company, what you say about your product, what you say about, the status quo that customer's on, if you're making that up every time, you're bad at your job.
Yeah. What about, I'm curious, I guess the process of tracking all of this, right? If you're working for a company, obviously they're going to, have your closing ratios and all of that and be able to determine are you good or are you bad?
And the good leads go, or the good territories or the good time slots always go to the people who have the most success.
Yeah.
get along with their manager. There's a chapter in a book called Managing Your Manager, because that person is really vital to your success. Someone who controls that. And if they're not as invested in your success as they can be, then you're going to have an uphill battle.
Yeah. You are just starting with a company, brand new. Maybe you have a background in selling whatever, the same type of products before in the past. How do you track things personally to be able to say, like breaking things down and being able to say, when I said this or when I did that, I had this positive response. So I guess it's like a self-improvement type plan. Like, how can you evaluate yourself and start to realize I should try to tweak this or change this, or this is where I always fall apart or stumble? Are there any techniques or things like that that you can describe that might help someone who doesn't necessarily have the mental fortitude to be able to track themselves or be able to say, okay, I need to change this or I need to tweak that? Like, how do you get into that mindset of being able to identify where you are doing good and where you're doing bad with your presentation?
Most of people's awareness of it comes when they're doing bad, right? Because when you're doing good, you just keep doing what you're doing and keep finding more success. You have that confidence. There's a couple of ways that can go bad. The biggest thing is people smell commission breath. And that's and the problem with commission breath is it makes it about you. The quickest way to kill a sale is to make the sales meeting about you and not serving your customers' needs. And that's really my beef with all these books on closing that want you to run over the customer or marshal your self-will. And it's so at odds with everything I understand about true success as a closer and even as a salesperson. I think there's, on most sales teams, it's a old saying, but it is really true. There's usually 20% of the sales team that does 80% of a company's business. And part of the reason I want to write the book was to tell the 80% what the 20% will never tell them. Which is the mindset you need to be successful, the fact that you have to have a very firm understanding of what parts of the pitch are just an emotional journey you're taking each new customer on, and what parts are really figuring out how to work with, understand that customer's needs at the beginning, and then use that understanding to work with their resistance and get them to say yes, get them what they want at the end. But the key to curing commission breath that I also have in the book is to focus on your decision rate, not your closing rate. So how many customers you met with made a decision? And if you focus on that, because every customer who doesn't make a decision is a no. So if you focus on who makes a decision, if you have a good product and you work for a good company, those numbers will take care of themselves. And the people in that 80% that are selling 20% of the business, I guarantee you a lot of their lack of success is from people who they perceive as not having made a decision. And if they can focus on inspiring that customer to make an informed decision and really don't care whether it's yes or no, they will find great success.
Yeah, that's interesting. And until you just said that last statement there, I was going down the path of how do we define decision? But I feel like it's too literal that way because it's more in your head that you're talking about, right? Don't worry about the yes or no as the decision, but like you get away from that because that's what everybody focuses on. That's, again, like you said, the closing breath where it's either got to be yes or no. Again, if you're looking more at that decision, then that's the point where you're trying to get to. That's the goal, I guess you can say. And it kind of changes where your outcome will be, or where your outcome will be, where you'll feel like your outcome is going toward, right? I guess if that makes sense.
Did I get that customer? But if you're focused on the decision rate and you're not getting decisions, what do you need to do? The thing you need to do, generally speaking, to get that customer to make a decision, number one, you probably need to ask one or two more times what they say afterwards. But the other thing is, am I giving this person all the information that they need to make a decision? Or do I trust my expertise and have I established trust and expertise so that they feel like I understand their needs in such a way that I'm recommending the product that they should either go with or not? And it's not every product is right for every customer. And sometimes someone looking into something is just them finding out that it's not for them. And I want to be the person that helps them understand that because it creates trust, and trust is everything. There are moments in every sales meeting where you have to decide, am I going to say the thing that makes that customer like me? or the thing that's going to make them trust me. And going back to where this whole discussion started, you said you have a customer that's done their research, which basically means going on the internet and finding how much something costs. By the way,
Right.
percent of the time, when someone says they did their research, all they know is how much it costs. And usually they just know the cheapest version. And so your job at that point, your opportunity is to explain to them and get them to come into the understanding that you have, because you're probably not working for their cheapest option. And if they understand why you're not working for the company with the cheapest option and how your expertise makes you work for a company with a better, more expensive option than what they think this thing costs, that's a great way to get their attention. That's a way you can become fascinating. The standard for a sales meeting, in my opinion, is you have to be fascinating all the time. The minute you stop being fascinating, good luck.
Yeah. That makes sense too. And you can always tell when eyes are on you, right? If that makes sense, right?
Right. We're putting on a show. You really,
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. You talked a few minutes ago about the pitch and all of that. And I'm just curious if maybe this is answered in your book, but do you have any type of a pitch framework where someone could fill in the blanks, if you will, sort of ad lib style, where they can create their pitch and then present it? And
but for first 40 pages are how I came into the information I came into. If you ever bought a car or a timeshare on a day you were just looking, it will tell you why. But also just, it's crazy how I got the information I did. And it's a fun story. And then there is a long how-to on turning your pitch into what I call on-call magic, which doesn't mean if you're B2B and you're just meeting with someone who can only say, it's still, you have one opportunity when you have the element of surprise, when they don't who you are, who your company is, all the things that you know about this product, this service, this company that they don't, and how to get that across in the most powerful, emotionally engaging way possible. So that when you say, are we doing this? Or are you interested? Or whatever it is to that customer, they go, yeah, of course, who wouldn't be? Like, that's what their brain thinks, even though they might say, this is a big decision or whatever. And then the last part is on creating happy customers and a referral-based business in the world that we're in, which also always requires closing. Customer write you a 5-star review because you did a good job. That's not, they pay you because you did a good job. And that is the end of their commitment. So if you want them to do something more than that, there are skills you need to have and a consciousness that you need to bring to it and I think I break some new ground. I think there are techniques in there that people don't do typically that they would benefit greatly from. If your company doesn't have 5-star reviews from every person you did a good job for, this is a good boat to teach you how to do that.
Yeah, love it. Bob, this has been fantastic. All kinds of nuggets in here. If people want to learn more about you or your services or the book, what would be the best way to reach out and learn more?
My website's joyofclosing.com, and there's a contact or work with Bob button on there that people use. If you buy 20 of my books, I will gift you with an hour of my time, and that can be used any way you want. Working with your sales team, working with anyone really who interfaces with your customers has the opportunity to close them. And they're either closing them on the experience that they're having being exceeding the expectations that were set at the time that they engaged your services, or on this person really doesn't care and they're just doing their job. And really anyone in your company who interfaces with a customer at best will be a closer. Once people have that relationship with customers, it really is it's a rising tide that lifts all boats. So anyway, or we can just work on your team's company story. There's a lot of ways you can use that time. So that's one way. I'm on LinkedIn. My YouTube channel is Joy of Closing. My TikTok is Joyful Closer. And I'm going to have threads in Blue Sky. So yeah, and I'm on Instagram is Bob King 3400.
Excellent. Excellent. So you're on you had all of them covered.
It's on.
Yep. Beautiful.
There's a Kindle, there's a paperback, and there is an audiobook that I recorded.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Excellent. Thanks, Bob. This is, again, fantastic nuggets. And I hope that this is going to help people get to be more confident in how they present themselves, how they present their company, and moving in the right direction to be able to create more sales.
I wanted to be a force for good. The worst companies are the best trainers of closers, and we need to turn our.
Yeah, that's interesting. Why do you think that is?
Because they have to.
Yeah, I guess it is. Yeah.
Because a customer would never make an analytical decision to go with those kinds of companies. And so it has to be a limbic brain decision, or they're never going to get any business.
Yeah.
And
What?
but limbic brain decisions are the best decisions we make. And that customer who goes with you because it feels right is hardwired to have a great customer experience. And if you don't know that, think about your own life. Think about the things you bought because you trusted someone and how did that go? And
Mhm.
thought after spinning your brain how to get $2 off a hotel room, and then you show up and it's some shitty thing with a toilet down the hall. We are meant to help each other. We are meant to be of service to each other and to lend our expertise to total strangers. And it done in the best possible way, and to help each other make decisions that are hard. When you buy something, you are out time and treasure. And so being able to help someone do that in a way that is genuinely beneficial to them in as little time as possible is the best way to be of service. Those are some that really have a value, not just to that customer, but especially to their company. And when you're able to engage with them on that level, it makes your whole life better. And that's really what I'm here to help salespeople get in touch with, is how to get in touch with their own good and their company's good and make a customer feel it and make a customer value it. And if you're not doing that for your company, if you're not doing that for your customers, if you're not doing that to the people that you're raising money from, you're missing an opportunity.
Yeah.
And just out of curiosity, do you have any type of metrics on how much more successful you will be when you are selling in this way? I don't know if that's even quantifiable, but I'm just curious. It popped in my head. So
My background's in home improvement. I will tell you, anybody can sell 10% of the people they see, generally, because that person, whatever, they took time to meet with you. Some of them are going to go forward. They're just too lazy to meet with anybody else. Or maybe you're a little bit cheaper than the first guy they saw. So they're like, fine, let's do it. There is price condition by the right company and you're the right place at the right time. Superstars in B2C tend to close between 20 and 25%. And when you really embrace the principles that are in my books and become the most effective gauger of that customer's emotions and learn how to earn their trust and inspire them to make an informed decision, your closing rate would be above 30%, sometimes as high as 50%, depending on the month and what kind of other urgency factors are actually involved. So yeah, you could double and triple what you're doing right now quite easily. And I'm sure there are people in your company right now who have that level of accomplishment. And the only difference between them and you is they know how to close and you don't.
yeah, interesting. Bob, thanks for the time here today. And again, I think this is going to help a lot of different people. I appreciate everything here.
Great to spend time with you.
Huge thanks to Bob King for sharing his wisdom on the power of closing and creating true value for customers. If you want to become a closer, not just a salesperson, be sure to check out his book, The Joy of Closing, and dive deeper into the art of decision making. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and join us next time for more game-changing insights that'll take your real estate journey to the next level.